ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. We'll chant the invocation verse on the page 4. Vasudevendra Yogindram Natva Jnana Pradam Gurum Mumukshunam Hitarthaya Tattvabodho Vidhiyate. This is the verse of invocation and also the verse in which the author proposes what it is that he is proposing to do. Tattvabodha Abhidhiyate. This text, which is entitled Tattvabodha, is being composed, is being presented for what? Mumukshunam hitarthaya, for the benefit of the mumukshus. We will have an opportunity to understand this word further subsequently, but mumukshu, mokshu michuhu, mumukshu, one who is desirous of moksha is called mumukshu. And moksha means freedom, or moksha means release or liberation. The word moksha is derived from the root much in the sense of release. Moksha means released or liberation or freedom. Mumukshunam hitarthaya, for the benefit of those who are desirous of liberation or those who are desirous of release or freedom, for their benefit, this text called Tattvabodha is being presented here. Having done something, Natva, having saluted Vasudevendra Yogindram, my teacher, whose name is Vasudevendra Yogindra, that's the name of the teacher. Also, the teacher of Adi Shankaracharya ji, whose name was Govindapada, also was called Yogindra. Vyasam Shukam Gaudapadam Mahantam Govinda Yogindra Mathasya Shishyam. So, the Adi Shankaracharya's teacher, Govindapada, was called Yogindra, means he was called one of the most exalted yogis. Because when young Shankaracharya of the age of 8, when he set out from south, from Kerala, all the way to Madhya Pradesh in the north, when he came, he found that his guru was in Samadhi. And so he took some 7 rounds. He was in a cave, he was absorbed. So this is how Govindapada is known, as one who was a great yogi. And so here references Vasudevendra Yogindram. So Vasudevendra, name of my teacher, who is the most exalted yogi. Having saluted him, he is my teacher. Jnana Pradam Gurum. Having saluted my teacher, who has imparted me the knowledge, who is one of the greatest yogis, whose name is Vasudevendra or Govinda, having saluted him, I present this text or treatise called Tattvabodha for the benefit of those who are desirous of liberation or desirous of freedom. In composing this verse, a prayer is performed offering salutation to the Guru or the teacher, and as we say in the morning, Vasudeva is also the name of Lord Krishna, and they were offering salutations to Lord as well. This was the advantage. In India, formerly, most people were named after some gods or goddesses. The advantage is when you call your son or daughter, automatically you are uttering the name of God. So that also is an advantage. Of course, the child also knows what the name is and what that god or goddess stands for, and so in a way there is an awareness also that this is my name and therefore I must try to live up to that name. All of these were also involved in naming the child. So, Govinda was the name of the teacher of Adi Shankaracharya. It also is the name of Lord Krishna. Therefore, when you salute Govinda, it is salutation to both to the teacher as well as to the Lord. Seeking the grace both of the teacher as well as the Lord. So in the Vedic tradition, teachers are held in very high esteem and they are looked upon as no less than God. In fact, sometimes there is a very famous couplet wherein the poet says that look, my teacher and Lord, both of them are standing before me. Who should I salute first? Who should I salute first? Then he came to the conclusion that I think I should salute my teacher first, because it is he who has shown me the Lord. And so, this is a kind of status that the teachers of Brahma Vidya enjoy in the Vedic tradition. And so, offering salutation to the teacher, that is a devotion to the teacher, is to seek the grace of the teacher and also the grace of the Lord. And this grace is always required basically to remove the obstacles from the path. There can be obstacles. Even in writing a book, there can be obstacles. So what we want is not only that a given text or a treatise should be written without any obstacles, but then it should serve the purpose. It should reach the right audience. It is not enough that we have written, but then it should find a print. Not only it is printed, but that it should reach the right people for whom it is written. Not only it should reach, but then it should be read by them, studied by them, and they should benefit from them. So the mumukshunam hitarthaya, the purpose of writing this treatise is for the benefit of the seekers of liberation, spiritual seekers, and the effort of composing this treatise would be fulfilled when those aspirants really are able to be really benefited inasmuch as when they achieve the goal that they are seeking, namely they achieve moksha or liberation. So that all these should be accomplished without obstacles. And for that we require the grace of Lord, because all you can do is to make an effort to write. But while writing also, you must have the right thoughts occurring in the mind. So there must be right inspiration. And so mind must come up with the right thoughts, right insights. There also we require the grace, because all knowledge always takes place by the grace of the Lord. He alone reveals himself as knowledge. So there is a very great saint there was, whose name was Tulsidas, in North India about 500 years ago, who composed a very famous text on Ramayana, which is very well known in India. And in one of the couplets he says, Shri Guru Charana Sarojaraja Nija Mana Mukura Sudha Varanam Raghubar Bimala Jasu Jo Daya Kufalachar. I am now about to describe the glories of Lord Rama. I am now going to describe the glories of Lord Rama. That is naturally done with my mind. That in my mind, the right thoughts or inspirations occur. For that, my mind should be very clear. So he compares his mind with a mirror. So usually, my mind is like a dusty mirror. Or the mirror has the capacity to reflect what is in front of it, but if it's dusty, it cannot reflect properly. So my mind is like a dusty mirror. So how do I clean the dust? For that you must scrape the dust. Shri Guru Charana Saroja Raja. So I clean up the mirror of my mind, clean up of the dust by the very dust of the lotus feet of my teacher. So he takes the dust of the lotus feet of his teacher to wipe out the mirror clean, so that the mirror can reveal the glories of Lord Rama. This is a kind of devotion and reverence that the teachers enjoy, in the Vedic tradition. And therefore, having grace of the teacher is considered to be extremely important. As we saw in the Bhagavad Gita also, Lord Krishna said that, may you please your teacher by offering prostrations, by rendering service to him, by asking the right questions. When the teacher is pleased, so pleasing the teacher, seeking his grace. So this is one important thing, prayer, seeking grace of teacher as well as the Lord. And the author also in this verse accomplishes another task of presenting what we call Anubandha Chatushtaya. These are the introductory reasons why somebody should study this text. Anubandha means the connecting link, something that connects you with the text, connects the reader with the text. Understand that before we accept or prepare ourselves to study a book, certain questions arise in our mind, and only when those questions are answered satisfactorily, that we'll proceed to read something. We are not going to invest our time just to read anything and everything. And therefore, it is necessary for the author to clarify certain basic things. They are called the fourfold factors. Anubandha. Anubandha means that which connects. So that connection or the attachment or the link is called Anubandha. And that there are four links or the four factors which are called introductory factors, which when we understand and we find that they are suitable, then alone we proceed to read the text. These four are called Vishaya, Prayojana, Adhikari, Sambandha. Subject matter, Vishaya, subject matter. What is the subject matter of this text? First question we'll ask, what is the subject matter? Is it physics, chemistry, theory of relativity, particle science, physics? What is it? It's Vedanta? Okay, I'm interested. Alright, Vishaya. So subject matter must be first clarified so that the reader is clear as to what it is that he would expect when he studies the text. Second is Prayojanam. What is the purpose to be served when I study the text? Suppose I gain the knowledge that is propounded in this text, what benefit do I stand to gain? So benefit that one attains is prayojanam, the purpose, that also should be clarified. And then I would decide whether I am interested in that benefit or not. Third clarification that is required is adhikari. Who is the fit or qualified student? So this text or treatise is written for whom? So what is that audience which is kept in mind while writing a treatise? So when we write any book, when we do anything, there is always an audience in mind. When you write an article, write a booklet, write a book, you give a talk, there is always an audience in mind. So what is the audience in mind, and do I fit into that or not? So what kind of a student he must be or she must be? Adhikari, who is a fit student for whom this text is written. And Sambandha, having gained the knowledge of this text, having gained the knowledge, what do I need to do to achieve the ultimate purpose of my life? If moksha or the liberation of freedom is the ultimate purpose, then after studying this, what should I do, or what do I need to do to achieve the purpose of my life? That is called Sambandha. So Vishaya, Prayojana, Adhikari, Sambandha. The subject matter, the purpose, the qualified student, and the relationship or the connection that is required between the knowledge and the end to be gained. So this is clarified in the second line. These fourfold factors are clarified in the second line of this verse. Mumukshunam hitarthaya tattva bodha. What is the subject matter? Tattva bodha. The subject matter of this treatise is tattva bodha. Bodha, the knowledge of truth. As I said in the morning, tattva bodha, the knowledge of truth. So this is the subject matter of the treatise. That's called Vishaya. What is the prayojanam? What's the purpose? Mumukshunam hitarthaya for the benefit of the mumukshus, for the benefit of the seekers of liberation. For their benefit, this is being written. That's the purpose. For whom it is written? Mumukshunam, for the mumukshus are those who are seekers of liberation. So for the seekers of liberation, this is written, so that they can achieve the purpose of gaining liberation. That's the purpose. And for that, this text called Tattvabodha, the subject matter is the knowledge of the truth, is being presented here. Alright, suppose we gain the knowledge of this treatise. What do we need further to do in order to gain moksha or liberation? Says you need not do anything else. This knowledge itself is the means of liberation. The reason why this is stated is that, as we said in the Veda, there are primarily two sections. First section dealing with karma or the rituals, other section, this section dealing with knowledge. Now, Vedas present many rituals. And may say that Jyotishtovena Swarga Kamaha Jajeta, one who is desirous of Swarga or the heavens, may that person perform this yaga called Jyotishtoma. So may he perform this ritual. Fine. So you know how to perform the ritual. But knowing the ritual itself is not enough. You must actually perform the ritual, meaning that you must perform that action in order to achieve Swarga. So as far as the Karma Kanda is concerned, mere knowing how to perform ritual is not enough for us to attain the end result, but performance of ritual is necessary. Just as knowing how to make banana bread, that I know the whole recipe, is not enough. I must make it, then only I can enjoy it. So when it comes to karma or the rituals, then knowledge alone is not enough. We must do something. Use that knowledge and do something, perform an action, then alone the ultimate result can be obtained. So next week, Swami, we are going for a cruise. We are all going to Puerto Rico, and then a 7-day cruise. So all wonderful knowledge, but you must go there and do things. Then alone you can enjoy that cruise, not otherwise. So that is the orientation which is there in the first section of Veda. Therefore, when you come to the second section of Veda, that is the section dealing with knowledge, the question necessarily arises, what do I need to do? After gaining the knowledge of Vedanta, what do I need to do to achieve moksha? Do I need to do something? Answer is no. In this case, knowledge itself is the means of moksha. Nothing needs to be done. All we need to do is to gain this knowledge, gain an abidance in this knowledge. And then the purpose of our life, namely moksha or liberation, is achieved. We'll see how that is so. So thus, in this first verse, the author presents the prayer, seeking the grace of the teacher as well as the Lord, and also proposes the fourfold factors which are required for us to know, so that we get tied to this text. That yes, I am interested in moksha. Yes, I am a mumukshu. Yes, Tattvabodha is a means. And yes, I want to gain the knowledge. So now I am very clear. Now otherwise we close it and then it's okay, I am not interested. Moksha, I don't care. Suppose. Oh, it's not for me, Swamiji. Vedanta is not for me. I know moksha is fine, but it's not for me. Vedanta is too much. Bhagavad Gita is too much. People think that it's too much. Then also you want to listen to this? Or if you think that after gaining the knowledge I must go to Himalayas and perform meditation in caves, if that's a requirement, I can't do that, Swamiji. So sambandha, that connection also is important. But we are now convinced that no, this is for us. And so we can now proceed with the text actual. So the teacher makes a statement here first, the next passage. Sadhana chatushtaya sampannadhikarina moksha sadhana bhutam tattva viveka prakaram Vakshamaha. Vakshamaha, we shall describe. So the teacher now says, we shall describe, what shall we describe? Tattva Viveka Prakaram, the mode of discriminative knowledge of truth. So we now shall describe the mode of discriminative knowledge, Tattva Viveka. This word Viveka, Viveka means discrimination. Actually Viveka means separation. The word Viveka is derived from the word which, in the sense of prasakkaranam, separation. So Viveka means separation. So here the author says that, now we are going to describe how one gains the ability to gain that knowledge which involves some separation, which involves some discrimination. So when is separation needed? Separation is needed when two things are so intimately mixed up with each other that at first sight they seem to be one, even though there are two, at first sight they seem to be one. The standard example that we give is one of the red hot iron ball. The iron ball, which is round and cold and black. Put it in a furnace and it slowly gets heated until it becomes red hot. So now we have a red hot iron ball, which is called a fireball. In this fireball, we have two entities or two elements. One is iron and other is fire. But the fire pervades every atom of iron. So at first sight, it looks like a fireball. It's one round ball of fire, so it looks like. And so, some uninitiated person might come to the conclusion that this is a round ball of fire. But in fact, the round ball of fire is the union of two elements or two entities, the iron as well as fire. So this we should know. And therefore, this separation has to take place in our mind, that the round form belongs to the iron, the red color belongs to fire. The heat and the red color which is there in the fireball belong to fire, and the round form belongs to iron. What has happened is, because of this intimate union of iron and fire, it appears as though iron has acquired the qualities of fire and fire has acquired the qualities of iron. So iron, which is cold to touch and black in color, has become hot and red on account of the association with fire. And the fire, which is formless, has nevertheless as though become round on account of its association with iron. This is called mutual pervasiveness. And in order to know that this is not one entity, there are two entities involved, in our mind the separation should take place, that the round form belongs to iron, whereas the red color and the heat belong to fire. The fire which is formless appears to be formed, and iron which is black and cold appears to be red and hot. So if we take the iron to be red and hot, there will also be wrong conclusion on our part. If we take the fire to be round, that will also be wrong conclusion on our part. And therefore need to separate the two. The form belongs to iron. The heat and the color belong to fire. Another example that is given is that of a crystal, which by itself is transparent and clear. But when we place a colored object beside the crystal, then the crystal appears to be colored. Does it? It does, appears to be orange. So now you have in front of you orange crystal. Now, we should know that, so if you conclude that the crystal is orange, then it will be a wrong conclusion. And then whatever you do with reference to crystal is likely to be wrong. So it is necessary to know that the orange color belongs to a cloth or some other thing, whereas the crystal in itself is transparent and colorless. This is called viveka, the separation that takes place in our mind. Or while watching a play, as you will watch on Friday evening in the cultural program, you will watch your children playing variety of roles. I don't know what play they have selected, but whatever play they have selected, it may be from Ramayana, from Mahabharata, from some place. If it's Mahabharata, you may see Duryodhana, you may see Yudhishthira, you may see Arjuna, Dushasana. Dushasana is a villain. Duryodhana also is villain. But possibly that your son may be playing that role. And so, just looking at it, at the first sight looks, hey, there is Dushasana here, Duryodhana here, Ravana here, a villain here, a thief. Then my neighbor says, no, Swamiji, stop it, wait a minute. He's not a thief. He's not a murderer. Then he's not a criminal. Who is he? He's my son. So when I do not know, so I may take it to be one entity, namely a criminal, whereas in fact there are two entities there. One is the actor, other is the role that he plays. But the father or the mother who knows, who is wise with reference to who is playing the role, he or she knows that no, this is my son, this is my daughter. So there also a separation takes place in our mind, separation between the actor and the costume. That Duryodhana belongs to costume, Ravana belongs to costume, criminal or villain belongs to costume, whereas the person wearing the costume is totally different, is unaffected by the costume. If indeed my child became a villain by assuming the role of villain, I would never allow him to do that. Even then also children do not want to do. They don't want to act as villain, they don't want to take these roles. Somehow they feel, they don't feel good. But actually there should be no problem because it's a role. He doesn't really become a villain. He doesn't become a criminal. He doesn't become a... Sometimes you just have the duty of a gatekeeper. Sometimes they make several monkeys, because there are so many children sometimes. And you must give role to every child. And there were other monkeys and they, in the army. So they put on all kinds of costume, our Savitri Mani is everything. If my child is going to become monkey by taking role of monkey, we would never have it. But I know that in spite of acting as a monkey, he does not become monkey. Thus in my mind, a discrimination, a separation or viveka takes place between the costume or the role and the actor playing the role. In case of crystal, between crystal and the color. In case of the red hot iron ball, between the iron and the fire. So we have experiences of what we call viveka or discrimination. So many examples we give to understand, to explain what is meant by viveka. Where viveka or discrimination or separation has a role to play when two entities are so mixed up with each other that at first sight they look like one. In fact, there are two. And something similar is happening with reference to our own self. Here also there is an actor and there is a role or a costume, as we will see subsequently. Here also two entities are intimately mixed up with each other. The self and the non-self. The person and the personality. The Purusha and Prakriti. The consciousness and matter. Both of these are so intimately mixed up. We will see subsequently that this body, sense organs, mind, intellect, this complex that we have is personality, is composed of matter. This text will explain that. However, we experience that the body is sentient, is live. Although body, being product of matter by itself, is insentient. However, we find it sentient, live. So what is it that imparts sentiency to this body? It is the consciousness or the self or the Purusha or the person or the self that imparts that consciousness to the body or sentiency to the body. It is habitual for us to take whatever is sentient as the self. This body is sentient, therefore we naturally take it to be the self. Our mind is sentient, therefore we take the mind also to be the self, not recognizing that the sentiency that the body and the mind enjoy, they are not their own. In fact, they are nothing but reflected from consciousness. Just as when we see a bulb glowing, some uninitiated person may think that the bulb itself is glowing, but the person who knows what is involved recognizes that it is electricity because of which the bulb is glowing. The filament by itself is not glowing. Filament by itself is just ordinary. It's only when it comes in contact with the electricity that it starts glowing. So there also viveka, separation, that filament is filament and electricity is electricity. It is by the union of the two that we have this phenomenon called light. And here also there is self and non-self. Both of these are united, mixed up. And therefore we have the phenomenon called life. And so life is a product of the union of the self and non-self. So what we take it to be one, namely our self or ego, is made up of the two entities, self and non-self. And that is why it is called discriminative knowledge. That knowing self means knowing self as distinct from non-self. Separating the self from the non-self and knowing the self. So that's called tattva viveka, the discriminative knowledge. Therefore the author proposes that now we are proposing the mode of discriminative knowledge of the truth. Tat viveka prakaram vakshamaha. We are now going to describe that. What is there to gain from that? Moksha sadhana bhutam, which is a direct means of liberation. Knowing this. So what the author says is that knowing my true self, right now the self and non-self, both of these are mixed up here, and where there are two, there is now a confusion or a delusion of one. Just as in the fireball, even though there are two entities there, we may take it to be one entity, namely fireball. Here also, the self and non-self, the person and personality, both of them are involved, but we take it to be one. So ego is taken to be one entity, whereas ego is a complex entity made up of the person and personality, or spirit and matter, or self and non-self. So when we know the self as distinct from non-self, we recognize that the self is free from all limitations. All the limitations belong to the body. Limitations belong to the mind. This is comparable costume. Self is like the actor. This body-mind complex is comparable costume. So all limitations belong to the costume. What is happening right now is that the limitations belonging to this body-mind complex are superimposed upon myself, and I look upon myself as a limited being. Like an actor performing the role of a beggar. If somehow forgets that I am an actor and he takes himself to be a real beggar, suppose, then he suffers from the deprivation and impoverishment of a beggar. Even though he may be multimillionaire, but he suffers because this kind of a delusion or a confusion has happened in his mind that I am a beggar. So you and I take ourselves as beggars. I am mortal, I am ignorant, I am unhappy, I am limited, I am helpless, I am insignificant. These are the conclusions I have about myself. I am a man, I am a woman, whatever. All these various conclusions we have about ourselves are on account of lumping together the self and the non-self, the actor and the costume, both are lumped together, and therefore we are entertaining these wrong notions about ourselves. Therefore, it is necessary to separate the two, the self from the non-self. When we gain the true knowledge of ourselves, then we discover that we are already free. The freedom that I am seeking is already my nature. Therefore, this knowledge is moksha sadhana bhutam. The knowledge is the very means of liberation. That's all. What is this knowledge? That I am already liberated. That's the knowledge. But how do I find myself bound? It is because the bondage is in one place and I am imposing upon myself. How can it be, Swamiji? It can happen. Sometimes it can happen. That what is my not my nature is taken to be my nature. So, we tell the story of this disciple who was serving his teacher, and they were perhaps living in a forest, and as we said, one of the things that a disciple does is to serve the teacher. Apart from various things that disciples were doing for the teacher had a number of cows with him. So one of the duties of the disciple was to take these cows for grazing in the morning and bring them back in the afternoon. So 4 cows. Every morning he would take the cows early morning, bring them back. One afternoon, when he returned, he found that then he would bring the cows back, he would tie them to their respective posts and then go on with other work. One afternoon when he returned, he found that one of the ropes is missing. 3 ropes are there with which you could tie the 3 cows to their posts, but this 4th rope is missing. How am I going to tie this cow? He goes to his master, goes to the teacher. Sir, what should I do? One rope is missing. So the teacher says, don't worry, just go and tie the cow. But the rope is missing, how can I tie? Just tie, I'm telling you. Just tie the cow as you do every day. This fellow could not believe that. But anyway, he led the cow to the right position and made all the gestures as though he was tying the cow with the rope. And to his utter surprise, the cow just stood there as though it was tied. This boy could not believe that. So every half an hour he would go and see whether the cow is still there or he thought it would walk away. But to his utter surprise, for the whole night the cow remained there. From then he knew that my Guru is a Siddha Purusha, he is an accomplished, he has some powers. Now next morning, he is now taking the cows for grazing. This 4th cow is not tied, so he twisted the tail so the cow would start moving, but the cow would not move. So he went to the teacher again. Sir, what have you done? This cow is not moving. What should I do? Hey, did you untie the cow? But I didn't tie in the first place. No, untie the cow. He was surprised. Okay. He went there and did the gestures of untying the cow. And to his utter surprise again, the cow started moving. So thus, this is all that is necessary for the cow is to feel that it is tied. It is not necessary that the cow should be really tied. All that is necessary is for the cow to think that it is tied. And so also we think that we find ourselves to be bound. It is not necessary that we should be really bound. All that is necessary is that we should think that we are bound, and that's the case. That's what Vedanta says, that, hey, even when you take yourself to be bound, you are not. Even when you take yourself limited, you are not. Thus, discovery that I am limitless. Even when I take myself limited, I am free from all limitation. This discovery is a knowledge, moksha sadhana bhutam, and that makes me free or liberated. This is what we are going to tell you. Sadhana chatushta sampanna adhikarinam. But for the qualified ones who are endowed with the 4-fold qualifications. So who is the adhikari? Who is the person who will most benefit from this teaching? Is the one who is possessed of these 4-fold qualifications. So Vedanta talks about this qualification of a student. You know that every knowledge requires preparation. If I want to go to university, I must have the preparation of the high school studies. If I want to go for a PhD, I must have the preparation of a master's degree. Preparation is always required. As Swami says, this fellow wants to study calculus. And he's not sure whether 3 plus 4 is 7 or 9, he's not sure. And then he wants to study calculus. That doesn't work. He must gain the preparation required to study that. So also, some preparation is required to be able to assimilate this knowledge, not study as such, but assimilate the knowledge. That the statements of scriptures and teachers really touch us and create an understanding in our mind. For that, a certain frame of mind is required. Understand that this communication is in the form of words, in the form of sentences. And to understand any sentence or any word, we require preparation. Even to understand these words in English, some preparation is required, that you should know the English language. But suppose I go to medical school, I know English language, and I attend some classes there, what am I going to understand? Only is, was, that, and some particles, that's all I can't understand anything there. Or I go to some class in particle physics, I can't make out anything because samskaras, preparation is required. Here also, so those words which they use in medical science or they use in advanced physics, it is not enough that I just have the knowledge of language, but then I must have the understanding, some maturity to understand what those words mean. Here also, when Upanishads or Vedanta tells us that you are limitless, this is what they tell us. That's the only thing that is taught here, you are limitless. Now these words that you are limitless or you are free from limitation of time, place, all these words, in order for them to create an understanding in my mind, it's required that my mind should have a certain preparation. Even when I utter the word flower, when I utter the word mango, if I utter the word turban, suppose these words are uttered, when will they create in your mind an understanding? When your mind has a preparation of that language and whatever is required to understand that word. Meaning that the words can create understanding in our mind when our mind has requisite preparation. Similarly also, the words of Vedanta can create understanding in our mind when we have the requisite preparation of the mind. And that preparation is called adhikaritum, the fitness. So Vedanta scriptures say that these fourfold qualifications when we have, this preparation when we have, that maturity that we have, then the words of the Vedanta will be able to reveal their meanings in our mind. So that student who has this qualification will be most benefited. But suppose Swamiji we don't have, then what should we do? Should we close this now? Everybody has these qualifications in one measure or the other, and therefore everybody will benefit in one measure or the other. So let us see. So let us proceed to the next passage now. So when this teacher made a statement that we shall now describe the mode of discriminative knowledge of truth, which is direct means of moksha, liberation, for those who are endowed with these fourfold qualifications, the student's eyebrows are raised. This is fourfold qualification. So he asked this question, next question. So next is the question from the student. Sadhana chatushtayam kim? You can see how a statement made by the teacher raises questions. Then that is answered, raises another question. This is a way of unfoldment. So when you say something, it gives a certain understanding and it raises certain question. When you ask that, when that question is answered, it gives some clarity, but yet another question is raised. When you answer that, and that's how the teacher also is leading the student in the process of contemplation or deliberation upon the truth. So knowledge is gained by deliberation. So the teacher wants the student to deliberate, and therefore the statements are made which gives a certain understanding to the student, at the same time creates a certain question in his mind. So thus, when the teacher said that what we are going to say will be for the students possessing these fourfold qualifications. So a natural question is, what is this fourfold qualification? Then the teacher answers, what are these four qualifications? Says the next sentence. Nitya nitya vastu vivekaha iha mutrartha phalabhoga viragaha samadhi shatka sampatti mumukshutvam cha iti. So what are these 4 qualifications that a student should have ideally when he will gain the most benefit from the study of this treatise? Says, first is vivekaha, nitya nitya vastu vivekaha. Nitya anitya vastu vivekaha. Viveka, discriminative knowledge between nitya and anitya. Nitya means eternal, that which is free from limitation of time. Anitya, that which is limited in time. So, mind that has the ability to distinguish between what is nitya and what is anitya, what is eternal, what is non-eternal, what is permanent, what is not permanent, what is not bound by time, that which is bound by time. So, the ability to separate the two, this is called viveka, nitya nitya vastu vivekaha. The discrimination between the nitya and anitya, the eternal and ephemeral. It seems that there are 2 things, eternal and ephemeral. Why do we need to separate them? Because they are mixed up. Where are they mixed up? In myself. That means that in my own self, there is something that is nitya or eternal, there is something that is anitya or ephemeral or non-eternal, something that is changeless and something that is changing. Since these 2 entities are involved in my own self, therefore the need to separate the nitya from anitya, the changeless from the changing. Okay, what next? Iha mutrartha phalabhoga viraga, the second one. Viraga means dispassion. We explained the word viraga. Viraga means that from which raga has gone away. Vigataha raga yasmat saha viraga. That from which raga or attachment has gone away, or passions have gone away. Viraga means dispassion. So second qualification is dispassion. First qualification viveka, discrimination. Second qualification viraga, dispassion. Now dispassion towards what? Iha amutra artha phalabhoga viraga. Dispassion from the bhoga, from enjoyment. So dispassion from the pleasures or enjoyments coming from sense objects. Iha and amutra phalabhoga. So from the objects which are the fruits of the actions performed here and hereafter. The idea is that, see, the Vedas look upon the universe as made up of 3 worlds. This world, the intermediate world, and the heavens. So here and hereafter, put it this way. Here is this life, hereafter is life after. So there is a life after also. There is a process of this, what we call the process of the birth and death, a continuous cycle of birth and death. That the person who dies, as long as the person dies, with the thought that still I have not fulfilled the agenda of my life. Each one of us is born with one single agenda. And what is that? That is to become free from every limitation. That is all we want. And we strive for the whole of our life in becoming free or happy or successful, whatever you call it. If at the end of the life I feel that I have not been successful, I have not been free, I have not been happy, I have not been satisfied, if that is my conclusion about myself, then I will take another embodiment to continue that pursuit. So human life is the pursuit of limitless freedom or limitless happiness. And until we fulfill that pursuit, we will continue to strive, and inasmuch as every embodiment has a certain lifespan. If in that lifespan that pursuit is not fulfilled, then I will take up another embodiment, and that is how the process of seeking this moksha or the freedom will go on. There is no eternal condemnation and there is no eternal heaven also. What it is the actions that you perform and the results that you get. Perform actions that are virtuous, you may get perhaps in a place called heavens for a period of time, you may get a seat there, enjoy the pleasures, come back here. If you also manage to perform some vicious actions, then you might gain birth in some other realm where you experience the results of those vicious actions and come back again. But ultimately, every jiva or every individual soul comes back as a human and continues the pursuit. So this is how the setup is. So in the Vedic time, this is not very relevant today. In the Vedic times, people perhaps had a tremendous fascination for heavens, to go to heavens and enjoy the pleasures of heavens. When you get sort of burnt out of the pleasures here, then you always imagine that, all right, there is some other realm where we can have those wonderful pleasures. So everybody wants to come to United States, and people here, they want to go to Florida, they want to go to Puerto Rico, and they want to go to Australia and New Zealand, things. So everybody wants to go everywhere else, because where you are, you feel that there is enough. Now I must go somewhere else. So you want to Hawaii. Hawaii fellows may want to come to California, but California fellows want to go to Hawaii. Similarly, fellows on the earth want to go to heavens. And thus, sometimes, therefore, we have fascination for the pleasures here and hereafter. We'll talk about that. So, freedom from those fascinations, or freedom from those temptations of the pleasures which can be obtained here or hereafter. That's called vairagya, freedom from passions, or freedom from the fascinations for pleasures. What's the third qualification? Shamadhi shatka sampattihi. The sixfold sampatti means wealth. The sixfold inner wealth. Samadhi, beginning from shama. Shama means tranquility of the mind. So the sixfold inner wealth beginning from tranquility of the mind, which we will describe. So that is the third qualification, that we should have viveka, discrimination, vairagya, dispassion. At the same time, we should have the emotional maturity, which is characterized by the sixfold inner wealth. We call the sixfold divine wealth. So two kinds of wealth is there in our life. One is this material wealth that we have in terms of money and other things like power, etc. Other is the inner wealth that we have in terms of the tranquility of the mind, in terms of the devotion, in terms of the shraddha, the faith. So that is inner wealth. And it is necessary to have that inner wealth also. That's the third qualification. Fourth is what? Mumukshutvam chaiti. And also mumukshutvam, desire for liberation. So, muktamiccha mumuksha. The desire for mukti or liberation is called mumuksha. So, mumukshutvam, the desire for liberation. That's the fourth qualification. So, this is just, right now only names are given. What are the four qualifications? Those of you who are familiar with Sanskrit somewhat, to them, my suggestion will be that when you go back to your room, then repeat these sentences number of times. You can memorize some of these passages. Simple passages, you can memorize them, and they'll be very helpful to you. So, what is sadhana chatursa sampatti? What is the fourfold qualification? Viveka, vairagya, samadhi, shatka, samadhi, mokshutvam, chaiti. Okay. What is viveka? Then you can rattle out these definitions. And the advantage will be that whatever you can, whatever passages you think are important, it's always a good idea to memorize certain things, so that when you are by yourself, you can bring back those passages in your mind. You can memorize in English also, not only in Sanskrit, in English also you can do. But it's necessary to retain something. The knowledge is that we should best be retained in our mind. Then it can be useful. When you have some leisurely time, you're taking a walk, or you have some time to yourself, your mind is leisurely. You can bring back some of these ideas and then dwell upon them. like, like chewing the cud as a cow does. So it collects, it eats all the grass during the day, then sits under the tree and chews the cud, brings back that in its mouth and enjoys the very taste of that the grass. And so also we gather all these things in the class. It's like the cow grazing. But we also need time to chew the cud, to bring back this in our mind and dwell upon them, and so that you get a further clarity. Also you have something to think about. Mind very often just wanders into useless things, and therefore you can give a certain occupation to the mind. Come on mind, think this. What is Viveka? Think about that. What is Vairagya? Get a clarity. Because clarity is the name of the game, really. In knowledge, clarity is most important. If you have the clarity, it will then reflect in our life also. So, just a suggestion that you have time here. And so, go back to your room and you do that. It's a good idea to take some of these sentences and if you know Sanskrit, memorize them. Know English? Okay. But try to remember them. Alright, so these four qualifications are told. Viveka, Vairagya, Samadhi, Shatka, Sampatti, Mumukshutvam. But they are just names are given. What do they mean? So further questions are asked. Let us look at one more sentence there. Nitya Nitya Vastu Vivekaha Kaha. So student is asking, sir, you said Nitya Nitya Vastu Vivekaha. The discrimination between Nitya and Anitya, that which is eternal and that which is ephemeral, changeless and changing. So what is that? Nitya Nitya Vastu Vivekaha Kaha. What's the nature of the discrimination or separation, the discriminative knowledge between Nitya and Anitya? Timeless and time-bound. Okay. Nitya means avinashi. That which is indestructible is called Nitya, so not subject to destruction. So time not subject to bondage of time. So what is that? Then the teacher replies in the next sentence, Nityam vastu ekam brahma tad vyatiriktam sarvam anityam ayameva nitya nitya vastu vivekaha. So teacher says, Nityam vastu ekam brahma. There is only one timeless, nitya or eternal thing, and that is called Brahma. So, Brahman, which is one and non-dual, and that is eternal or timeless. Tad vidiriktam sarvamanityam. Everything other than Brahman is all time-bound, is all changing, is all perishable, is all ephemeral. So thus, in our life, there are these two entities. In our own self and everywhere in our life, there are these two entities, Nitya and Anitya. What is Nitya? Eternal, imperishable, is called Brahman. So this word is very famous in the Upanishads, Brahman. Brahma means limitless. The word Brahma is derived from the word Bruh, in the sense of Vruddhi, in the sense of growth, in the sense of bigness. So Brahma means that which is big, which is free from every smallness, which is limitless. So in Upanishads we find the word Brahman very often used for denoting truth or Ishvara or God. There are other words also, but this is the most common word. In Chandogya Upanishad, they use the word Bhuman, which means abundant, which also means limitless. Sometimes they use the word Aksharam, which is imperishable, that also is used. But most common is Brahman. So that Brahman is eternal. Brahman is one and eternal, imperishable, free from bondage of time, changeless. Tad vidiriktam, everything other than Brahman is changing, time-bound, perishable. So this universe is an intimate mixture of the perishable and imperishable. we ourselves also are an intimate mixture of the perishable and imperishable, the eternal and the ephemeral, the changeless and the changing. Therefore, the need to separate the two, because otherwise a lot of confusion exists. The self that I am is eternal, is changeless, whereas the costume that the self expresses itself. See, this body is a very beautiful instrument for the manifestation of consciousness, the self. Just as the filament in an electric bulb is a very fit and appropriate instrument for manifestation of electricity. And so also this body is a very fit instrument for manifestation of consciousness. But understand that electricity that manifests through that filament is different from filament. We should know that the filament is changing. It can fuse also. Electricity is changeless. Just so to distinguish between the two. And we should know here also that the body, the mind, this personality, this complex is changing, perishable, mortal, eternal, is non-eternal. And the consciousness of the self that is manifesting here is changeless, is eternal. So nityam vastu ekam brahma. So timeless is one, and that is Brahman. Tad vyatirektam, distinct from that, sarvam anityam, all else is time bound, is changing. Ayameva, this indeed is nitya nitya vastu vivekaha. This is the discrimination between nitya and anitya, the timeless and time bound, the changing and the changeless. We will continue our discussion tomorrow in the next class. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Krutau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmedi Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyoma Vadvyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.